Good afternoon. Sorry to have to be so formal stand up here, but we are doing this as a live webinar, so we have to at least be, we have to play to the cameras, what can I say? Do this, and I have a paid announcement here to start this off. Welcome to the Protecting Responders and the 9/11 Health and Compensation Act, the Zadroga Act webinar. And I'd also like to welcome those of you who are watching us and participating from afar. Couldn't make it here to New York City, so we will try to include you also, and as we go through this, that anyone that is participating from a distance, as well as you here, can submit questions. So we'll have a Q&A period as we go along here, and those that are participating in the webinar can also send in any questions that they may have. You enter your question in the text box at the bottom of the right hand of the screen that you're looking at. Now we can't see that here, so I'm hoping you can. And then you hit the submit button, and the question will be sent to the panel at the appropriate time. We actually have somebody here who's monitoring that. And as I said, those of you that are in the room here also will have the opportunity to answer questions and so forth. Let me briefly introduce our panel. We all know each other and worked together for a period of time, and either in the implementation of the program, which we'll describe in a second, but even before the act was passed, and also now in the ongoing implementation of getting the legislation passed and the ongoing implementation of the act, including the Victims' Compensation Fund or compensation part of the act. And so my name is Jim Milius. I'm the chairman of the Medical Advisory Board and was involved in the program. I also have with me, starting at the end there, Bill Ramaka, who's the Health and Safety Director for IAF Local 94. Richard Allies is the Health and Safety Director of IAF Local 854, the officers local here in New York City. Dave Prezant, who's the Chief Medical Officer, and other titles that I can't keep track of anymore because they keep changing, of the New York City Fire Department, but obviously someone involved from day one. And then maybe the newest member of our group, but a very welcome member and someone we're all welcoming the opportunity to work with, is Sheila Birnbaum, who's the Special Master for the September 11th Victims' Compensation Fund, which is the compensation part of this program. And so our goal here today is sort of give you an overview of the legislation, the program that's being enacted. Now, some of this is building on what's already been in place for the last 9 years, going on 10. And some of this is new and it's in transition. The Victims' Compensation Fund, at least it operated earlier, but now has been reconstituted to provide compensation for responders and others that have been affected by this. So we're going to describe how this new program will work. We'll often refer to what's been in place already. I'm going to try to do this informally, and I may ask people to explain certain things. This is an unrehearsed session, and we do have a series of PowerPoint slides that you'll be able to see, and those of you that are watching from a distance participating will also be able to see that. It'll help to explain some of this as we go along. As I said, the 9/11 Health and Compensation Act will provide medical monitoring and treatment for responders and people living in the community that were affected by exposures from 9/11. That's sort of Part A. And Part B provides compensation for the responders in the community also, and it's sort of the parallel part of that. And we'll start by going through some of the medical, but some of it, you have to realize that this is something that we built up from the ground and is building on what has gone on before. And so none of this is like just starting up now, and all of this took a long and hard effort to get the legislation passed and in place. But I'd like to first start off, and maybe Dave, if you'd like to just sort of explain how the program initially got started in the New York City Fire Department, and how we built off of that. And then we'll talk about how we use that information in that effort in order to get the bill, and why we got the bill needed to get the bill passed?
Well, those of you who know, the New York City Fire Department has been at the forefront of helping the IFFF to design the Wellness Fitness Initiative that many of you are hopefully lucky enough to participate in your departments back home. And the Wellness Fitness Initiative we started working on, I believe, in 1994, and finally got it up and running probably by around 1996, and really focused in on a lot of different objectives. But one of those objectives was getting baselines on people knowing that as firefighters you are exposed repeatedly to hazardous elements and unfortunately have the potential to be exposed in the various different disasters that you face almost every day. We didn't conceive, or at least I didn't conceive, that there would be a terrorist event of this nature in 1996, but we had had the bombing at the World Trade Center in '93. We had had other massive events, and all of those are potential exposures. So we thought it was very, very important to protect the health, maintain your health and fitness so that you could be prepared for this, but also to have a baseline so that we would understand what the aftermath was. We had chest x-rays, we had pulmonary function tests, we had monitoring questionnaires, we had physician exams, bloods, urines, et cetera, et cetera. With the World Trade Center, the two biggest exposures were obvious, and that was a respiratory exposure from the aerosolized particles and a mental health exposure from the amazing trauma that all of the firefighters faced that day. And we had had baseline characteristics on all of those, including pulmonary function tests, spirometry, and chest x-rays. That day, many of us, including myself, were down there, and one of the most frequent things that firefighters said when they came out was, "This smells different than any fire I've ever been to before in my entire life. This is not the same." All right? And you know that firefighters don't even talk about fires when they come out. You know, it's sort of like, it's a fire, what's the big deal? All right? Here they said this was different. All right? And then the other thing is, firefighters, a few of them get coughs, they get a variety of different respiratory complaints, but for the vast majority of that few, all right, it goes away in a few days. All right? Here we had 99% of our firefighters who came out of that fire coughing consistently and repeatedly for weeks, all right? And that's different. So once we saw that these things were different, we knew we had to do something. And we started bringing everybody down for a repeat, essentially, of the wellness fitness exam that the IFFF has pioneered. We redid their spirometry, we redid their chest x-rays. We developed specific questionnaires to capture more of the physical health and mental health components that we were worried about, but we were able to develop those questionnaires rapidly because we had had the baseline questionnaires from the IFFF to build on. All right? And we also did a series of specialized blood tests with the CDC and NIOSH as partners so that we could understand if there was any strange analyte that you were being exposed to that we also should be cognizant of. And we found all of these things. We were able to compare to prior data, and what we showed was that pulmonary function tests, which normally decrease about 26 milliliters per year, a very small amount just due to aging in our firefighters between '97 and 2001, was decreasing just based on what you'd expect from normal aging, so SCBA works. What we found was in the 6 months after 9/11, there was a drop of 355 milliliters on average, so that's 12, 15 times what you'd expect. And once we were able to see that, we then knew that this was not just a cough. This was an absolute assault on your lung function. Right? Now, the good news is, because we have such a fit workforce, it doesn't mean that every firefighter is disabled. All right? Because if you start off at 120% of predicted, and you have a 355 milliliter decrease, it may bring you down to 100% of predicted. You may notice a difference, but you still may be capable of doing a lot of things, including your work. But it also means that many people are disabled. And actually, this month in the American Journal of Industrial Medicine, we've shown that 1,400 people qualified for respiratory World Trade Center related disability, had substantial objective findings, not just a cough, but real findings on pulmonary function tests that merited disability. And with that, we were able to convince Congress, working with Dr. Melius and the IFFF and the UFOA and the UFA, that this is a real illness, that this is real. And I'll just close by saying, in the first few years when we were up there working with Senator Clinton and Congresswoman Maloney and many others, often those people that were not interested in this bill would ask question after question after question about what is the justification, what is the medical science. We don't believe that this is really an illness. We believe this is a bunch of people who are complainers. Why should we pay for complainers? All right. But in the last 2 years that we were there, we never heard that question asked. All right. All of our work totally silenced that. And our work would not have been able to do that without the IFFF Wellness Fitness Exam serving as a baseline.
I would just elaborate a little bit. In addition to firefighters, we also had police, construction workers, other workers that were at the site, worked around the site, that were showing similar diseases, illness, as in the firefighters. Often didn't have the baseline data, so the firefighter information was very important in dealing with the critics of who didn't want to admit that there might be a problem. But we're seeing the same thing in literally thousands of people. This was not something that was occurring in 1 or 2 or half a dozen. This was in thousands of people that had responded. And we're seeing similar diseases in the community. And we struggled to try to get funding together to keep programs going, to support the fire department's ongoing, New York City Fire Department's ongoing effort to provide medical monitoring and eventually treatment. We also were struggling to get the funding together that would keep these programs going. We literally went from emergency appropriation to emergency appropriation, threatens of closing the program down. So we decided over 5 years ago that we needed some sort of permanent legislation that would keep these programs in place over the longer term. And that turned into a longer term effort than we thought. And let maybe Bill and Mark and Rich Haley pick up and talk about some of the effort that it took to get this program through legislatively.
Well, first I just want to mention the fact that when Dr. Brazant said 1,400 people with pulmonary problems, that data is based upon only up to 2007. Yes. And that we've had many more after that also. So, and this is the whole problem with data, is that you have to put it in the proper context to Absolutely. Present it, because when we're talking to people, we're talking to scientists, we're talking to doctors, and we have to make sense of things for everybody. So to just throw numbers out there for people, when people ask us how many people have cancer, a number is not going to help unless you understand it in the context that it really should be shown in. You have to show the before and the after, and you have to put it in based upon the exposures. So there's a lot more involved with trying to prove things than just putting a number out there for the public to see. I apologize, I didn't mean to digress from what we're talking about and how we got the bill passed. And I'll let Richard take from there.
Good afternoon. This was a very frustrating journey. As Local 94 President Steve Cassidy alluded to this morning, it was 8 years too long to get this legislation passed. And it's not unique. The year following the attacks on Pearl Harbor, the many workers that had been involved in the cleanup had exhibited illness as well. And legislation quickly went through both houses of Congress and was signed by the President 1 year after Pearl Harbor. So we would scratch our heads, what was going on here? And we fought a lot of battles. I mean, I believe it was a perception problem that it was a New York issue. It wasn't a New York issue. New York was the site, but it was an attack on America, and that's what we tried to, the message that we tried to deliver, along with the medical documentation and all, to the various elected officials in Congress as we tried to lobby and lobby hard. But year after year, we would get shot down. In the year 2010, last year, we realized that the tide, the political winds were changing in the country, and it was becoming more conservative, and we were concerned that the House of Representatives was going to go from Democrat to Republican, and we were correct. And realized that if we did not get the legislation passed in 2010, we probably may never have been able to get it passed. So coming down the home stretch, there was a lot, I'd say the last 6 months, there was a lot of hard work and a lot of people that deserve credit. And we learned collectively, Billy and I, we would appoint people for our unions. We learned the value of this organization, the IAFF, because we had many groups, as Dr. Melanie has said. We had the police unions up here in New York. We had the trade unions under the AFL-CIO flag. We also had the contractors. Now, that sounds like management, you know, contractors. Well, the contractors were on the hook for lawsuits, and the reason being is because this was a national attack, technically the federal government indemnifies the workers. But because we were in a rush, the contractors came in without getting the official authorization from the United States government, FEMA, and they got the wink and a nod from then America's mayor, Rudy Giuliani. And it's one of many reasons why you'll never hear a good thing said about America's mayor from any New York City firefighter or fire officer. But again, with the IAFF, Billy and I, tortured our First District Vice President Kevin Gallagher with numerous calls. Every time, you know, we had to get to somebody in Florida, or there was a senator giving us a problem from Massachusetts, and on and on and on. The convention in San Diego in August was an enormous help. With Kevin Gallagher's permission, Billy and I went on a personal lobby to each state that we were having a problem. So we had everybody there. It was easy to find people. We would talk to the state president and say, hey, listen, Oklahoma, we're having a problem with Senator Coburn. Doctor, no. Can you give us a hand? And they would work. Massachusetts, same thing. We had a situation with Senator Scott Brown. Again, they dropped everything and came to our defense and assisted us. Because you try not to be a carpetbagger, you know, as you approach these different offices and you know, speak to senators and congressmen. But we were fortunate and coming down the wire to finally bring it to pass. And I really, Maine, we had the state president, John Martell, who had two moderate Republican senators that were a great help. He was there, came down about a half a dozen times, was able to get those 2 votes. Oklahoma was able to push Senator Coburn to the table at the last minute. Billy and I had a problem. I mentioned Scott Brown in Massachusetts, and it was 2 days before the vote. Yeah, and 3 days before Christmas, we didn't want to have we didn't want it to get ugly, so I placed a call to Ed Kelly and Richie Parrish, the state president and the local president in Boston. They dropped everything, jumped on a plane, and came right down. They got the vote. So there's many people to credit. It's unique legislation. It's not perfect. At that final hour, when we finally got Senator Coburn to the table, and Senator Schumer, who we met with the night before, needed to know how far he could go in negotiations. And it's not everything that we wanted, but it's not final either. I'm sure they'll discuss the scientific panel as illnesses are discovered. I'm sure cancer will be something to be discussed in a little bit. That's what we're hoping for. It's not perfect legislation, but thank God that we were able to get it.
Thanks. Bill, you have anything to add or you want to say?
Yes, a $4.3 billion bill takes the work of many. And we'd like to give thanks to our responders who constantly went down there. And it became a situation where we had concerns about our responders continually going down there. The officers union brought down Marty Fulham, who had a double lung transplant, and he ended up in the hospital. So it was like we couldn't keep on bringing people down there who were in ill health because, first of all, it takes an effect on their health as well as on their mind, their memories and stuff like that. It brings everything back to them. We just want to say that without the international's help, we don't think that we really would have got this off the ground. It was Kevin Gallagher reaching out to the district vice presidents and everybody working together to make this work. And when we picked up the phone, there was always somebody on the other end of it. I can't thank you guys enough because it's not just for New York City, it has to be for you guys, and you guys have to understand how to access the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah. What we did was we gradually built up a program with federal support for this. We started out with initially funding to fire department, other medical institutions for doing medical testing, sort of what Dave described early on. The wellness and fitness sort of expanded out, do that. We then, in 2007, we actually got money that the state of New York was going to send back to Washington because they hadn't spent it after 9/11 they're supposed to provide compensation, and they decided to buy some computers and not provide very much compensation. So we got that reprogrammed to set up money for medical treatment for World Trade Center related conditions. Kept that going, and then through the legislation, we got everything essentially authorized, institutionalized in a way, at least going forward for the next 5 or 6 years, we have guaranteed funding for this program, not only for New York, but for the firefighters and other responders throughout the country who've been affected by this. And also they're evaluating both the Pennsylvania, Shanksville, as well as the Pentagon situations, which may very well be added to this program in some way. I'm going to start by sort of describing this, and I'm going to ask Dave and Richie and Bill to fill in on certain issues. The program provides medical monitoring to everybody, focusing on World Trade Center related conditions. It provides treatment for World Trade Center related conditions. We'll get into that in a little bit. And most importantly, it doesn't cost anything. It is free. These are, as it should be. There's no cost to the participant for any of either the treatment for the World Trade Center related conditions or the medical monitoring. We even have a provision in there for people that are outside of New York, if they need to travel to a distance to get their medical care for this program, that they'll get reimbursed for the costs of that travel. It's eligibilities for any firefighter who spent at least 1 day, and 1 day is really defined as really a few hours doing rescue and recovery work at Ground Zero or the related areas, period from September 11th through July 31st, left something off there, of the following year, and that. For those there, the important number to take down is the 888 number there. That's the number for calling in, for enrolling in the program or getting information on the program. They also have the WTCexams.org website, which is not quite up and running yet. It just refers to the number, but it should be up and functional going forward. One of the key parts of this program, before we talk about the treatment, is the monitoring. And obviously, if you're someone that's sick, and we have a lot of people that are sick, this program since 2007, so it's not complete, has treated over 30,000 rescue, recovery, and cleanup workers who've needed treatment for World Trade Center related conditions. That's a huge number of people. We estimate there's only about somewhere. Okay, yeah. Estimated 70 to 90,000 people that actually worked around Ground Zero. So almost half of them have required some treatment for a World Trade Center condition. So one of the things that's important is the monitoring portion of that. And it's hard. It's an annual exam. It's a long exam. And Dave, do you want to sort of explain what the components of that are and how it works and why it's important? I think that's the.
So We've gone through many different versions of the questionnaires. The questionnaires are done in a way that we try to focus in on general issues and then on specific issues that may be World Trade Center related. So obviously, that's going to be a lot of questions about upper respiratory problems, specifically sinuses, nose, that type of stuff, and questions about lower respiratory because that aerosolized dust went all the way down into the lower airways.
Sorry, little technical difficulties here in New York, as I say. Dave, we interrupted you. I'm not even sure you got started. We were talking about the monitoring exams and the importance of those. So
we were talking about how our monitoring exam includes a pulmonary function test, which is spirometry, includes a chest x-ray, includes bloods and urines to take a look to see if there's been liver toxicity, kidney toxicity, diabetes, or other issues, signs of leukemia we can pick up from the blood tests. And then we have questionnaires, and that's what I was interrupted talking about, where the questionnaires are quite extensive, going into all the various different potential health components that might be possible from World Trade Center. Now, when designing these questionnaires, what we're often forced with is the challenge of a questionnaire that's too brief versus a questionnaire that's too long. And there is no perfect answer here. We can focus in only on the very illnesses that we have heard about being out there, that we're all suffering from, in which case we will never be able to detect illnesses that have a latency period associated with them. We can't detect those illnesses if we don't ask questions about symptoms and diagnoses that might be happening over time. Also, we have a problem with the questionnaires being used, being clear to the people that are taking them. All right, we have firefighters taking these questionnaires. We have EMS people taking them. We have construction workers. We have people that lived in the neighborhood. What we don't have is many patients or exposed people who are, professors of health science. So we have to word these questions in a way that everybody can understand them. And that takes time. So our first questionnaire was up and running 4 weeks after 9/11, which is a major accomplishment. And then we've gone through various different versions of these questionnaires over time to make them more complete and more accurate and more clear to the patients and exposed people who are taking them. The final thing about the questionnaires is over time we've also gotten more federal support so that we've been able to use critical technology to make the questionnaires flow better, so that now we have skip patterns in place where if you don't have any problem, you can skip the next 5 or 6 questions that might be asking about that problem. Of course, that puts responsibility on the patient or the exposed person to answer these questions appropriately so that they don't just skip out of them. And similarly, we've designed mental health questionnaires, concentrating at first on post-traumatic stress disorder, but then realizing that we weren't picking up illnesses that might be occurring later on. So we expanded these questionnaires to pick up depression, alcoholism, and other problems. Now, in capturing all this information, we have tried to be true to a very important motto, and that is this information is confidential, it's your information, the patient, but it should be used in a de-identified way to be able to answer questions, all right? And at least in our workforce, the firefighters and EMS workers in New York City, we've never had a problem with that because we've worked closely with both labor and management to understand that everyone deserves an answer to their question. And firefighters are very special people because they never ask just, how am I doing? They ask, how are all my buddies doing? All right? And we can't answer, how is you doing or how are your buddies doing if we don't have this whole information at our disposal.
Dave, one question on the monitoring. If somebody hasn't been examined now, participated now, why should they bother? It's almost 10 years later. Sure.
Well, I think there are lots of reasons to do it. And I think the first reason is because unless you go through, let me restate this. A lot of you guys do, incredibly important work with incredibly sophisticated equipment and a team approach. And what you do is you do like Air Force pilots, you have a checklist so that you make certain that you take care of everything before you go into the battle of a fire, all right? Well, it's the same thing with your health, all right? You can think you're well, but unless you go through a series of carefully constructed questions, you may not realize that you yourself have a problem. That's very important to go through that exercise, all right? The other reason to take the exam is to serve as a baseline, all right? A baseline for yourself. And finally, in my opinion, there's what you owe your coworkers, because we will never be able to understand how pervasive an illness is if we don't assess it in the entire group of people who responded. The fire department has 95% of its firefighters and EMS workers participating in this program. We don't have 95% of people who are ill, all right? We have 95% of people participating in this program because every one of them has realized the importance of participation. We don't have a program if we don't all participate.
Bill and Richie, a follow-up. I mean, this is a difficult area. You've got people detecting diseases and going to maybe disabling problems. How do you feel about the confidentiality in your membership's participation in the program?
In other words, I don't feel that it's ever been a question that there's HIPAA laws, there's everything else that when you come in and you tell us something, it's not going out, your name's not being broadcast, but it is going into a statistical database that is used to keep track of everything so that we can make informed decisions and get certain conditions covered. It's everybody's participation that makes this program work. Without everybody's participation, we don't have that set of data. Individual data, yes, but like I said, we're not violating anybody's confidentiality without anyone's permission. Even when people were asking us to bring people down to Washington, we're not going to tell people to go down to Washington because it might affect their health. But we could talk to them individually and see if they have an interest in doing it. So just like that, we collect data for a reason to try to make sense of the whole situation so that we get the proper things in place to help our guys.
Yeah.
And just to reinforce that confidence that the officers and firefighters in the New York City Fire Department have, it's a long-standing relationship between both unions and the Bureau of Health Services, Dr. Dave Prezant, as well as Dr. Kerry Kelly, who are our chief medical officers. That has the confidence of all of our members, so there's never any doubt when we're participating in any kind of study with our Bureau of Health Services. No one hesitates to participate and to give out any and all information that's required.
I think just to elaborate on that a little bit, the overall program, there's a high degree of confidentiality, but there's also a high degree of integrity built into the program. Everybody involved, all the medical centers, including led by the New York City Fire Department, they're honest brokers in how this is done. The exams are done in a way that the results are honest. The diagnoses, if you fit the criteria, you get the diagnoses. It's fair and open that way. And there's been strong labor participation in overseeing the program. I chair a steering committee for the program that's half the members of the clinical centers, directors of the clinical centers that participate. Half the members are labor representatives for people participating in the program. And we're involved in everything day to day and ongoing with the program. Informed of all decisions, informed of changes in the program, provided ample opportunity for input to make sure that the program's integrity remains, that people are treated fairly, and that conditions are recognized appropriately. Dave, then somebody has a question. I'll get to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on that real quickly about that integrity issue and the partnership issue, because from day one, we worked with the unions to develop these questions, to develop this program. And there were certain questions that didn't meet mustard, and they were excluded. And then, when we finally launched the program, despite everybody's best efforts, there were some questions that didn't, again, meet mustard, and they were excluded. And there were some questions that people wanted added, and they were included whenever we could. And there was a meeting of the minds on this. So you need to have that type of partnership. And if you don't have that type of partnership developed early on, this won't be a successful program.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Tom Wright. I'm president of Chicago Firefighters Union Local 2. And I want to thank you for this opportunity and actually putting on this very informative piece here. One of the problems, and this will be the one that would have to be addressed for those who came that were outside the city of New York, that came and responded, and there was literally tens of thousands that did. And I can just speak from the experience from my members when they talk to me about their reluctance to get involved in a program such as this, because you know the pervasive nature of what's been going on in the country. Pension issues, cutbacks, works. Everybody is worried about, quite honestly, if their name shows up on a list somewhere, that somehow that will be used. Not that anyone's questioning the integrity of the study here in New York. Everyone fully understands and respects what you guys are doing. But the problem is that not everybody across the country is as upstanding as you are here. And they could possibly use this information to deny benefits down the road, either pension-wise or medically-wise. You know, some kind of, if someone comes down with a condition, they may say, well, wait a minute, you went to the World Trade Center, you were not authorized to do so, you're on your own. And that's what a lot of my members, and I'm sure there's members throughout the country that share the same reluctance. Is there anything built into the law that protects them?
Yeah, there's requirements on the medical side for strict confidentiality. So people being seen in New York or elsewhere, there's very strict confidentiality. You know, any sharing of the information is in an unidentified fashion for purposes, and there is no access to the information. I mean, Dave Prezant in the fire department here, we knew that'd be a concern, and built into his contract with the federal government limitations on that. I'll also, I mean, and we've also made some changes and requirements that are undergoing program for people for outside of the New York City area. Not everyone can travel there. We've strengthened the national program, but also strengthened that, making sure that program has a component that works with the responder who's ill or whatever, making sure that they get the assistance they need, social assistance, referral for workers' compensation, whatever needed, in a way that protects them. So they're don't have to go back to their fire department for that. And then I think the third major component of that, remember, we now have an independent compensation system finally that will deal with that. You know, a lot of the people that on the USARS team and so forth that came in, a lot of these were so-called federalized, were supposedly covered by the federal workers' compensation system. That didn't happen for, we know, in several instances. Not sure it worked for anybody that came in and that would have been covered there. Some of the fire departments across the country have been good in helping people. I'm sure there are others that have, I know that haven't been in their membership. So we think confidentiality, assistance, plus the new compensation program component, which we had until now through the Victims' Compensation Fund, will help to ensure that. And we think we have much better oversight over that part of the program. But those are key critical issues, and it needs to be implemented and made to work. And one thing we're working on here is that we've actually, with the fire, we've actually set up a advocacy program that's independent and through the unions to help monitor what's going on and help provide some of that, make sure everyone gets that assistance no matter where they are in the country. Not just in, you know, most people in New York, but the people other places need the same services as good as we can get them and the same kind of support mechanisms.
Well, as they say, actions speak louder than words. And you guys, your actions have been phenomenal. Yeah. And my whole thing is you can understand the skepticism of some of those that are outside New York.
I absolutely do, and I hope you know, we can come back in 2 years or 4 years and have workshop and can report how well it's working.
I will be happy to pass along the information.
Okay, great.
And Tom, I think that they're looking at it wrong when they think that it's going to be used against them. What we do with the medical monitoring program is help members build up a case for themselves that can be used for them. So they're looking at the glass half empty when they should be looking at the glass half full. We have,
Well, they're firemen. They always do.
well, that's a good point. But whether you're authorized or not, you're still classified as a volunteer, and the whole thing is meeting the eligibility requirements, and then you get into the program, and the medication will be taken care of, and it also help out the locals and stuff like that. So as many people as you can, you get registered who are there so we could track them better. Make them understand the benefits of the program, that it's not designed to be used against them, that there are confidentiality laws, and no one here will ever give their information to be used against them.
Thank you all for your efforts.
thanks.
Really appreciate it.
Just want to briefly hit on, there's the treatment in the Zadroga program covers what we refer to as World Trade Center related conditions. And these are, I think Dave described many of them: respiratory disease, sinus conditions, GERD, and then post-traumatic stress, other mental conditions. These were all we had good evidence from the clinical programs that these conditions were increased at pretty dramatic rates among all the firefighters and other responders that were in the program. And I think there's very little sort of question about the basic conditions. We worked very hard to make sure that the complications from these conditions are also included in the program. It's become a little bit more bureaucratic as we're discovering and as we've sort of got the program authorized, but we needed to do that in order to make sure that Congress and everyone knew that the funding was being expended appropriately for World Trade Center related conditions and to that. And have criteria for these, and these are all on a very solid basis. And I know, Dave, if you want to elaborate at all on that, but the list of conditions, but I think it's something that, based on the experience in the program, it's important. It's also, I think, very important to know that many of the responders in the program suffer from several of these conditions, including both mental health and physical health conditions. These are very much interrelated from the exposures, and they're serious and require long-term treatment. And I don't know what your estimate is, Dave, but maybe you can just give a little bit on the need for to what extent are these conditions chronic? Is this short-term treatment, long-term treatment? Is it the disease is progressing? What's going on, I guess?
I don't think any of these conditions are acute, temporary conditions. I think all of the World Trade Center conditions are chronic. That doesn't mean that people don't get better. The most common respiratory conditions, upper respiratory conditions, is chronic rhinosinusitis, which is a fancy word for my nose is always congested, stuffy, and drippy. The most common lower respiratory conditions are asthma, chronic bronchitis, and thankfully we have very few at this moment of emphysema and interstitial fibrosis, which are conditions that don't really benefit much from treatment at this time. The vast majority is asthma and bronchitis, which can benefit from treatment. But these conditions, although they can be markedly improved with treatment, especially asthma, they're always going to be able to get worse if they're in the wrong environment. Irritant exposures, heat, humidity, cold, the very things that firefighters are repeatedly exposed to. In terms of GI conditions, the most common is acid reflux, which is very important to control, because if we don't control it, it makes the asthma and the sinusitis worse. We all see the ad for the purple pill on TV. I can't mention the brand name because this is a webinar, but medications on TV are not incorrectly advertised. The FDA has to approve the advertisement, and it always says 6 to 10 weeks, X% of people have their condition completely cured. We haven't seen that in our World Trade Center patients. We've seen that the vast majority need to be on long-term months, years of medications to control their acid reflux. In terms of the mental health conditions, the most common are post-traumatic stress disorder. So much has been said about post-traumatic stress disorder with incidence ratios, event occurrences of anywhere from 7 to 30% of people that are involved, depending what type of experience they have. Typically, the percent rates are lower in firefighters than in civilians who were accidentally caught in the collapse, because you guys have been trained. But there are other mental health conditions that haven't gotten much publicity, which we're realizing now are becoming even more frequent than post-traumatic stress disorder. And for the most part, this is chronic depression and, unfortunately, alcoholism. This is a natural event. If you take away somebody's livelihood, the way they define themselves, the ability to climb 6 flights of stairs in 100 pounds of equipment and gear, this is who you are, making a rescue, helping people, putting that fire out. And then you tell that person, or life tells that person, that they just can't do that anymore. Add in a little post-traumatic stress disorder, nightmares, flashbacks, and you're in a situation where depression can occur, where this is just an enormity of an event for you. And one of the things that we do when we're depressed is we self-medicate ourselves sometimes with a little alcohol, a little too much. What was social becomes now non-social. There's great therapy out there for this. Just talking to fellow firefighters can be helpful. Bringing back that social support structure that we lose when we leave the workforce temporarily or permanently. And then, of course, medication and counseling and proven therapeutic approaches. Again, these illnesses are chronic, but they are treatable. And I think that's what we need to realize in the World Trade Center. And that's why, with everybody's help, we went from a monitoring program to a monitoring and treatment program. Because, you know, just categorizing everything that's happened to us is not very helpful if we can't treat it and help it get better.
Thanks. Dave? As I alluded to before, we've talked about there is a national program. Frankly, it's been around since the start of the monitoring and treatment program. It's never worked very well for various reasons, some of them being contractual, some of them being problems with the government getting these programs set up. There is one currently set up. We're in the process of getting that program modified to fit the legislation, and we think to make significant improvements on it. I mentioned better counseling services with it. It's currently through an organization called LHI based out of Wisconsin, but the medical network they use is a program that is United Healthcare System. So they have access to good physicians throughout the country, and I think the pool of physicians is good, and that it also includes, it's close to where people live. It's an extensive network. What we're now trying to do is to get that program more integrated, to make sure that that program can deliver the same level of high-quality services that we can provide in the New York City area. And we have to balance that, because we want to make sure that it's good care, but it also needs to be care that's convenient and flexible and convenient for the people that live in other parts of the country. So we think that over the next few months that program will improve. It's improved significantly in the last year or two in terms of being able to get more people examined and into treatment, and we think we'll be able to continue to do that. So, and we think it also will include for the first time better outreach resources. So we're going to work with them to make sure that all of the departments, all the unions that participated, had firefighters that were emergency responders sent here to New York, get contacted through that program and make sure that things are worked out so that services can be provided in really all 50 states and wherever people need them. So I think there's a good chance we'll be able to do that. I say we'll come back here in 2 years and you can ask if we've actually done that, but it has been improving. I think it will continue to improve, and it's critical because we don't want a program just for New Yorkers or people in the tri-state area. We think this program should be available to everybody who came and were exposed at Ground Zero and who came here to provide that assistance. So before we close on the medical program, though we certainly can come back. Does anybody else have any questions on the medical side of this? Because now we'll start talking about the compensation side, which is new and is just getting started. So yeah, Bill, you want to add?
Now, I just wanted to mention that we tend to, in New York City, we listen to our firefighters and our retired firefighters. When it comes to things like counseling service needs, we have a great counseling service unit. But we also understand and hear some people who have concerns about confidentiality or they don't have the trust in, and we don't have to go into whether it's valid or not. So we also offer outside counseling through organizations such as Friends of Firefighters, because it has to be about the individual. It can't be about trying to make them understand why a program works or trying to make them understand why they should be doing this. Counseling service needs you have to handle individually, and you have to make sure that you have the options available for the individual. And that's really what we do in New York City, and I would advise other cities to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Colin?
Dr. Jim, how are you?
Good.
Good. Just a question. I wonder if you could expand on the pulmonary or the respiratory diseases that you're seeing. I wonder if you've seen anything surfacing with respect to pulmonary fibrosis or sarcoidosis. If you've seen any increases in that.
So the New York City Fire Department was the first fire department to show that sarcoidosis was increased even before 9/11 in firefighters. And then following that work, because we were already set up to look for that illness, we showed that there was an increase in sarcoidosis after 9/11. With the 9/11 exposure. Subsequently, this has been verified in studies done by our stakeholders at Mount Sinai looking at non-firefighters. That should be published, I think, any month now, and also by the World Trade Center Registry looking at residents and other responders. So we have good evidence that the numbers are increased. More importantly than just numbers, the severity of the illness has been dramatically increased. Sarcoidosis before 9/11 in firefighters was essentially an asymptomatic illness. Sarcoidosis after 9/11 has been very symptomatic with both pulmonary complaints and other complaints, other issues such as rheumatologic problems. Now, in terms of pulmonary fibrosis, well, let me finish up with sarcoid. Sarcoid, in many patients before 9/11 was asymptomatic, so it was easy to treat it. There was really not much to do, nothing that needed to be done. And after 9/11, sarcoidosis, although symptomatic, is a treatable condition. There are very few people that it can't be treated in. There are very few people that go on to early death or need very aggressive treatment. That's the good news. Even further good news is your second part of the question, which is pulmonary fibrosis. We've seen very little pulmonary fibrosis, only a handful of cases with diffuse pulmonary fibrosis. Anybody can have localized pulmonary fibrosis. That's a little bit of a scarring. You have to watch how the x-ray reports are read, because a little bit of pulmonary fibrosis can happen just from an inhalation insult or pneumonia, and rarely results in any consequence. It's sort of like healing. But diffuse pulmonary fibrosis affecting both lungs and large portions of both lungs is a major, major illness that has no treatment, that can only be dealt with lung transplant, leads to early death, dramatically early death. If we were having that, and we were worried that we would have that from this type of dust chemical exposure, that would be an epidemic of amazing proportion. We luckily are not having that. We have a handful of cases. We've had 2 patients that have gone on to lung transplant. We've had one patient, one firefighter who died but before he was able to get into our program, and we have a few patients that we're following that haven't reached that point. we have not had large numbers. We have to look for that in the future, however, because it is known that this can occur 20 or 30 years later.
Yeah, I just add, Colin and I worked together, the Hamilton Fire Department, sort of a earlier version of this Zadroga Act program, providing medical follow-up for several hundred firefighters there that were exposed after a plastics recycling facility fire. And many of them were sick and continue to be sick. So got a monitoring program established for them. So that, yes, you're.
Thank you very much. My name is Germano Riviera, and besides being a survivor, I also was a rescuer, and I work on the pile with a lot of the, the firemen, firefighters. Mm-hmm. My question is, if the program will be available for the people that work at the World Trade Center and are planning to move to other states? If
yes.
they can carry that program?
Yeah, the national program will assist with people that live outside of the New York City metropolitan area. That's what it was set up for, and enrollment and the eligibility criteria the same and so forth. And then for people that are in the current programs that move and retire someplace or move out of the area for some reason, then it's available for them also. And then we're also actually have implemented, and we're trying to keep it implemented, I think, a program for people that move back and forth. We have people that, especially retirees, they'll move to the south and then come up to New York City in the warmer weather, and then back south when it gets colder. And so they have to continue their treatment and so forth. And we've had arrangements to do that, and we're hoping to make sure that those continue. There's some issues we're having to adjust things for confidentiality purposes and so forth, but that program is available. As we said, we're trying to make it more robust and better.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Do you have any webinar questions? Okay. Well, we're going to change focus a little bit, though. You'll see it's all really one program that's very tightly linked, and to talk about the Victims' Compensation Fund. And as I mentioned earlier, Sheila Birnbaum was a lawyer here in New York, very well-known, well-respected lawyer here in New York, really throughout the country, has been named to be the special master, which will be overseeing this program. As you may remember, Ken Feinberg was the previous special master. They had a big compensation fund that actually compensated some of the people who had become ill, in addition to those who, families of those who had died. There were almost 1,000 people, I believe, several hundred, that were compensated for mostly for acute injuries, traumatic injuries after that, but some with illness. And the new compensation fund is sort of reconstituted. I don't know what the legal term is, but it's a continuation. We're a continuation. We got it started again. So I'll turn it over to Sheila. If you want to. I can do the slide.
Why don't you do that? Yeah, okay. We could go through them. How much time do we have, Jim?
We still have 40 minutes.
Okay.
At least.
Okay.
At least.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I've gotten to know a lot of the people on this podium and working together with them to try to set up this Victims' Compensation Program. In some ways, the Victims' Compensation Program is an outgrowth of the first program, but the first program really was designed not to treat latent injuries because it only existed for 2 years right after 9/11. It was really meant to take care of compensation for those who had died either on the airplanes or at the World Trade Center. And as Jim said, there was some personal injuries, but they never handled the issue of latency, which is now what this fund is supposed to do and will do. It's a great challenge for me and a great privilege to do this administration of this fund. And I say it's a challenge because, as some of the other speakers have said, this fund is not created to do everything that all of its sponsors wanted it to do, because as it went through Congress, there were changes made. So as we go through these slides, and you ask your questions, you're going to see there are some limitations in the program. And in part, the compensation piece is what we call Title II of the Zadroga Act. Title I is the medical monitoring and treatment function here. And Title I covers some things that Title II does not. And maybe Title II will cover some things that Title I doesn't. But the part of the program that Jim and David have been talking about is the health program. And what's important, as we'll see when we look at what the compensation program does, the health program covers mental injuries, mental health conditions, and you can get treatment for PTSD and other mental conditions. As you'll see, when we get to compensation, Congress specifically limited that part of the bill to just physical injuries, not mental injuries. And for the moment, cancer is not covered either by Title I or Title II. But also there is a scientific advisory panel that is being created to continue to review the medical and scientific literature in order to be able to determine that there is a causation link between exposure at the World Trade Center and some cancers. So this is an evolving issue. It's going to continue to evolve as we learn more and more from the scientific and medical community, such as we are looking forward to seeing a number of papers that we understand are going to be coming out in the next couple of months. So what does the compensation part of this act does? As I said, it reopens the first Victims' Compensation Fund, which means we're going to follow as much as possible, when it is possible and when it is similar, what occurred in the first Victims' Compensation Fund, which I think was very successful. So we're going to use some of the same models that we used there, and you're going to see what we're able to do under the Act. And we want to do this in a very timely manner, although, as you'll see in the next slide, there are limitations on what we could do because of what Congress did. And I'd like to just go through some of the similarities and some of the differences. So the first requirement for eligibility is you have to be present. And the people that worked on the pile surely are present. The firefighters, it's easy for them. We have records of who was there. The same thing with the police and the emergency workers and a lot of the construction workers that were working on the pile. Now, one thing that this act has done is it has opened up compensation not only to those who worked on the pile, but those who lived and worked in the surrounding neighborhoods to the World Trade Center who have not previously been eligible for compensation. And although Jim said that there were maybe 60 to 90 types of people who worked at various functions on the pile, there are hundreds of thousands of people who lived and worked in Lower Manhattan who also may be eligible for this fund if they have some of the same World Trade Center related illnesses. So this is a potentially much bigger group of people than we had previously when we were looking at the first Victims' Compensation Fund. So you have cleanup workers, debris removal workers, certainly the first responders, uniformed responders and non-uniformed.
Yeah, Bill had a...
In other words, you said that they would be eligible. They would also have to document their exposure,
Oh, yes,
no?
I'm going to get to all of
okay.
that. They're eligible from a certain point of view, but as we get to the next slide, you're going to see they have to prove certain elements of illness and be present during certain periods of time. Before we get to that, though, the first Victims' Compensation Fund had no limitations. In other words, there was $7.5 billion that went out of the first Victims' Compensation Fund. This is a limited fund. There is $2.775 billion available in this fund. And Congress, only because of budgetary reasons, provided $875 million to be distributed within the first 5 years, the remainder coming into the fund in the 6th year. So how this would work was somebody puts in for an award, they put in their papers, they will be granted an award. But in the first 5 years, that award is going to be prorated depending upon how many claimants there are. So someone will not be able to recover the full award in the first 5 years. They'll recover some part of it. And in the 6th year, depending upon how many people have been awarded money and how much money there is left, there will be another award given, and that also may have to be prorated. So there is a limitation on the amount of the fund. The other problem with the fund to some extent is that the administrative costs for the fund come out of it. In other words, there's no separate fund for administration. So we're going to try to do this in the most efficient way we can possibly do it, because we don't want to use up this fund for administration. We want it to go to the people who are sick, the people who have had economic loss. So what can you recover for under this fund? It's for physical injury or death. And you have to show that the physical injury is a result of either the air crash or the debris removal. And there are, just as in Title I, certain injuries that are presumed to be World Trade Center injuries. We're going to show you what those are. Now, if you are eligible and if you are on the pile, for example, as a firefighter and have one of these injuries that are presumed World Trade Center injuries, you will be able to recover both your economic loss and your non-economic loss. What does that mean? Your economic loss could be loss of employment. If you had a partial disability or you didn't get full employment benefits, you can recover for that lost employment during the period that would have been your work life. You can also recover for non-economic loss. This would be the equivalent of pain and suffering. And there will be presumed awards for this element of compensation that will depend to some extent of whether you're disabled, whether it's a partial disability, or whether it is a permanent disability. The award is tax-free. It's not subject to any subrogation of any workers' comp or any other health care that had been given to you. But there are collateral sources that Congress has said that have to be deducted from this award. And that is based on life insurance, pension funds, disability, and any settlements that have occurred in some of the actions that had been brought by firefighters and others here in New York, and there have been settlements that have come out of that. That is deducted from the awards that would be given. One of the first things we decided, though, is if some people collected under the first Victims' Compensation Fund, they can come back to this fund. If their injuries have been exacerbated and they didn't collect the full amount of what they could have collected, or if there are new injuries that have been added to the fund, then people can come back. They can either supplement their first claims forms, and they will not be put at a disadvantage because they happen to have collected something in the first Victims' Compensation Fund. Now, the next issue for firefighters is not as important as for others because most of the firefighters would be at ground zero, and the old area where there was recovery for those who worked on the pile or immediately around the pile. This bill provides for a broader number of people who can bring a claim than in the original bill. And right now, that boundary is from Reed Street south in Manhattan, is the area that has been proposed for compensation if you have all the other elements, including the diseases that are covered. Now, one of the controversies that have arisen, of course, in the last couple of weeks is that the medical monitoring and treatment program under Title I was supposed to report and was required to report on the state of the medical and scientific knowledge and whether various cancers would or would not be included in the treatment program. And in a report that they came out with about 2 or 3 weeks ago, they held that there was insufficient evidence at this time to add any cancers to either to the medical treatment part of the program. And we have said on the compensation part of the program that if any conditions are added in Title I or by the Scientific Advisory Panel, there will be an immediate addition of those diseases or conditions in the compensation part as well. So there is going to be another review, I would imagine, within the year to take a look at this issue based on the new scientific articles that will be coming out later in the year. Now, before we were talking about the injuries that are covered, these are the injuries that are covered by Title I. Most of them are the kind of respiratory injuries that already have been described, as well as the gastrointestinal injuries that are covered in the Title I of the plan for treatment, and these are also covered for compensation. Now, what we've done so far is we have drafted draft regulations. The comment period has now ended, and we are reviewing those comments to see how we can change the draft regulations to accommodate the comments and take as many of the comments as we can to see if there's what we can do with regard to the final regulations. We've had at least 4 town halls. We've met with representatives of these unions and others, with interest groups, and have gotten as much input as we can in trying to create the program. We're working on claim forms now. Those people who already have been part of this treatment program, we're trying to be able to get electronically all of that information into this fund so that people won't have to get it themselves and go through the expenses of doing that. And we've been talking to the various centers of excellence of how we can get that data into our databases so that there is a friendly form that can be filled out, that can be used without victims having to go and get all these medical records themselves. We have a website. We have a bunch of frequently asked questions on them that we want you to look at because it may help you make these decisions of whether you go into this compensation fund. We're also going to have models that will show how the economics would work when we're up and running, and we're going to try to do this in the most efficient way possible. We will be up and running in October. That's the first time we could, even if anything else was possible. There will be ways of you finding out how to do this. If you go to the last slide, this is the easiest way for you to keep informed. This is the website that if you take this down and you go go onto that website, there'll be the ability for you to give us your internet address, and we will communicate with you when there's anything new that is happening, so you don't have to keep coming back to us. We'll keep giving you information as it develops, and our goal is to try to make this as efficient to work for all of you so that you can get these forms to us and we can start working on this compensation plan. So it is going to be a challenge to get up and running by October, but we're working very hard, running very hard to get that done.
Thank you, Sheila. I should warn you that if you sign up for these web alerts, you get an email from the Department of Justice, which certainly scared me the first time I got one, before I realized, thought I was in big trouble. But it was only an alert about a town hall meeting, so it wasn't so bad. But they do respond, and I'll give Sheila and her colleagues a credit. They really are making an all-out effort to make this get this program up and going and make it work for everybody. I know your internationals submitted comments on the regulations. I did, and others have also, to ask clarification on certain things and make sure that it runs right. One of the key things I should mention up front is we're not sure there's enough money in the compensation fund. And so we want to make sure that we identify that early as we can so that we can, as appropriate, go back to Congress and get more money in there. At least if the settlements follow the pattern of the original compensation fund, for many people, they will add a significant amount of compensation and make up for the shortfalls in our current compensation systems for people that are ill and injured. So I think it's definitely something that's worthwhile for people to do and participate in. One thing you went over quickly that I think is very important, particularly to people in other parts of the country, but also here, is the statute of limitations.
Okay, I'll be very quick on that. Yeah. There is a 2-year statute of limitations. If you have an injury now, the 2 years begins to run from the time the regulations become final, which will be sometime in September. So you don't have to rush out by October 1st and file an application. You can do it any time within the 2-year period, probably September 2013. The entire fund is in existence for 5 years. If we add new injuries, which is likely, the time for you to file a supplement or to file an application is then 2 years from the time we add the new injury. So if cancer is added next year, certain cancers are added next year, you would have 2 years from that time, if you have a cancer at that time, to bring a claim. You have 5 years as your outside period to bring a claim. The fund closes after 5 years.
And if you're newly diagnosed, say in year 3, then you still have 2 years. It's something you diagnose as World Trade Center related. But I think it's important that for people outside the area who may not have participated in the national medical program, whatever, if they've been diagnosed with a World Trade Center related condition by their own doctor, another part of the country, that there is that statute of limitation. So it's 2 years to file a claim. It's also important, you don't have to have participated in the medical program to file a claim. There'll be, they're trying to make it easier for people that are, and just in terms of the logistics, to save down on the, make it more efficient and save administrative costs. But there will be provisions for, people been diagnosed through their own healthcare providers to be able to use that information in filing these claims also. But keep in mind that 2-year statute of limitations, I think, may be critical, because if you're outside of New York, you're just not going to hear as much about this. This is obviously in the news a lot here in the New York area, and I think will continue to be. But other parts of the country. And we'll work to do outreach and make sure that people here and through your union and other means also. But we want to make sure that nobody gets missed, doesn't hear about it because you know, it didn't get publicized in the media and so forth. And I think the website and others will help in that regards. But and
we're going to do our own outreach to the populations that we think are maybe a little disadvantaged, as Jim said, because they're not in the New York area specifically. We're going to do a webinar in which we can explain to people how to fill out their forms and things of that sort. So we don't want people to be disadvantaged if they are not in the New York metropolitan area.
Bill?
Yeah, I just want to mention that we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the fact that at a point in time, we got in touch with Kevin Gallagher, who put us in touch with Mickey Mullane, who put us in touch with John Martell, the president of Professional Firefighters of Maine, whose wife actually mentioned to him that maybe we want to do something with a guy named Jon Stewart with The Daily Show. And they came along at a very important time when things were not going as well as they could have gone and gave us the national prominence that was needed. So every time everybody thinks that it takes one person, no, it takes everybody, and everybody stepped up to the plate, and we were happy to get that exposure, and we appreciate everything that Jon Stewart and The Daily Show did for us to give us that national platform.
And I think also, you know, the members of this union, the leadership of these unions, they really were very influential in working Washington in a way that helped get this through. And they are still fighting for you every inch of the way.
I have one question came up, reminded because Colin Grieve was here, but what about people from living in other countries? There were a number of people that came down from Canada and firefighters and others who came down to help out.
They would be able to apply as well.
Yeah, I think so. And I have an example of that when I was up visiting Hamilton this winter with the fire union, and the photographer for the local newspaper there came in, and he had spent a significant amount of time at Ground Zero and was having some health problems that could very well be related. And we need to do better outreach up in Canada also for the people that came down, and both to provide the medical as well as the making sure they're aware of the Victims' Compensation Fund is available to them. Richie, you have anything else to add?
No, just to remind the political action. You know, we beat the drum here in New York as you know, the rest of the country, and this international, which endorses candidates that support our issues, regardless of party affiliation, allowed us to be able to reach across the aisle. We had Republican supporters, we had Democratic supporters. Without that outreach, without the ability to be able to, you know, go across the aisle, this legislation would never have passed. So, in unity, there's strength.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, question, or comment?
Just comments, if it's okay. Kevin Gallagher, First District Vice President. First of all, I'd like to thank Ms. Birnbaum for taking on this tremendous task. We need someone that's got an open mind and willing and able and caring enough to do this job. It's a monumental job, and I wish you well in your attempt to take it on and do justice to the people that were exposed. As a former New York City firefighter and someone who dealt with Dr. Prezant over a very long period of time, his baseline study, which was started way back when I was around in New York City, is something that's going to make it very easy for Ms. Birnbaum to do her job, and it'll make it very easy for our firefighters to come out of this with their true exposures and showing that the baseline study aided in the differential between before 9/11 and after 9/11. It'll make it easy for compensation to be awarded. And so my two brothers over here, you gave a lot of credits and a lot of accolades to a lot of people, but without you two guys doing what you did and the work that you put in to push this through, it would have never happened. I take my hat off to you. You did a tremendous job. And finally, Dr. Milius, you're always there for us. You're always in the right spot, and you're always asked to do the right thing, and you've been there and you've done it for a long time for us. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
you. Let me just say that that was very useful, because without having had the baseline, it would be very hard to be able to establish some of the things that are now accepted. You know, it's sort of, we can put up there now presumptive illnesses, and it's in part, and in large part, because there was a before and there is an after, and you can compare the two. And now we have to do the same thing for cancer and other injuries, and that's what the people here have been doing and will continue to do. So thank you very much. And I can promise you one thing. We'll be fair, and we'll do this by the book, but we'll be also compassionate. Thank you.
And I would add what I said before, that you know, we have the programs in New York. We want to make sure that everybody in this union who helped out at Ground Zero gets the same benefits, the same program, and we'll work actively and work with you. And I know, speak for everybody, I know if you have questions, concerns about the program, you're not getting the answers you want when you talk to the NIOSH 800 number or whatever, or not sure where to get started or need some help, but let any of us know. I can be reached through the international. You can find me on the web pretty easily. Same for Bill and Richie, and I know Dave would be glad to talk to you or talk to physicians and locally that want to get some more information and so forth. We want to make sure that this program helps everybody who deserves it, so we will continue to work on it and work with you. And so we thank you for your interest, and Bob, for those of you that we can't see in the room, we thank you for your participation. We apologize for the break in service there. We had little technical problems, but we hope you could stay with it and hope that this was useful to you. Do that. So thank you, and I think we're done. Okay, thanks.